There's a question the Imperium doesn't want you to ask. Not because it's heretical, not because it threatens the faith, but because the answer is so profoundly terrifying that even the Inquisition struggles to acknowledge it. What happens when your soul becomes a liability? The Necrons know. They've known this for 60 million years, ever since they traded their souls to the Citan and became immortal machines. They understand something the Imperium refuses to accept. In the war between order and chaos, souls are a weakness. And now they're building weapons to exploit it. Weapons that create silence. This is the testimony of the Imperial Navy cruiser, Adamant Resolve. 73 crew who translated into what should have been routine recon. Dead worlds, empty space, standard work. They found a Pariah Nexus, a hollow world. A place where ancient Blackstone pylons sever the connection between soul and warp. Where the background radiation of existence, the thing you've lived in your entire life without knowing, suddenly vanishes. 18 survived. 55 died. But not from battle, not from disease. They died because living required a reason they could no longer remember. You're going to learn what the stillness feels like. Why servitors, lobotomized slaves, were the only ones who thrived. Why the crew begged for death or contemplated self-lobotomy just to make it stop. And you're going to learn the truth the Inquisition won't admit. The Pariah Nexus is expanding. More hollow worlds are being built. Within a century, whole sectors will fall silent. This is their warning, and the stillness is waiting for us all. Chapter 1. The Silence Before. Crewman Davros vomited into the steel basin for the third time that watch. And still, there was nothing wrong with him. The Medicae scanner had run its passes twice already. Green across the board. His blood pressure is very normal. Heart rhythm steady. No toxins, no pathogens, no corrupted food stores, no atmospheric contamination, no radiation exposure beyond standard void ship tolerances. The machine insisted he was healthy, but Davros stayed on his knees in his bunk alcove, gripping the basin's edges, retching up nothing but bile and spit. He'd served on the Adamant Resolve for 11 years. 11 years navigating the Immaterium, weathering warp storms that could turn a man's soul inside out, fighting Xeno's raiders, breathing recycled air that tasted like rust and engine grease. He'd earned his void legs young. He didn't get sick. Not like this. Not for no reason. But reason didn't matter to his body. His stomach twisted again. His hands shook. And beneath it all, underneath the nausea and the cold sweat, was something worse. Something he couldn't name. A feeling like absence. Like standing in a cathedral after the choir has left, hearing only the echo of silence where hymns should be. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and tried to stand. His legs wobbled, but held. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he'd imagined it. He splashed water on his face from the communal spigot and told himself he'd report to Medicae if it happened again. It would happen again. But by then, it wouldn't just be him. The bridge of the Adamant Resolve hummed with controlled efficiency. Brass instruments clicked and whirred. Servitors stood motionless at their stations, cranial plugs feeding data directly into their lobotomized cortices. Human crew moved between cogitator banks and Vox terminals with the practiced ease of long service. This was an Endeavour-class light cruiser, 3 kilometers of armored hull and plasma drives, one of hundreds serving the Indomitus Crusade's recon pickets. Not a grand vessel, but a reliable one. And reliability mattered in the void. Captain Herodon stood at the center of it all, hands clasped behind his back, eyes on the main viewport. He was a lean man, 63 Terran years old, with a face carved by 3 decades of void service and a jaw that could have been cut from granite. His uniform was spotless, the aquila on his chest polished to a mirror shine. He ran his ship the way the Navy taught, by the book, by the Emperor, and by the expectation that competence would see you through. "Translation in 6 minutes, Captain," called out Navigator Liaison Umeth from his station. The man was young, maybe 30, with the nervous energy of someone who'd survived 5 years of warp travel and still couldn't believe his luck. Navigator Yevron confirmed stable currents, approach vectors logged and approved. "Very good," Heridan replied. His voice carried that particular timbre of command, not loud, but impossible to ignore. "Helm, standard deceleration on emergence. Auger arrays to full sweep the moment we clear translation. I want a full system picture within 10 minutes of real space entry." "Aye, Captain," came the helmsman's response. Around him, the bridge crew went about their duties. There was a rhythm to it. Ensign Kalla read off course corrections. Gunnery Officer Prask checked weapon system readiness. Not that they expected trouble, but protocol was protocol. Master Vox Trell monitored long-range communications, one ear always tuned to the astropathic choir's chamber 3 decks below. Everything was as it should be, except it wasn't. Lieutenant Commander Senyev noticed it first. She was the ship's second officer, a broad-shouldered woman from a hive world whose instincts had kept her alive through the plague wars. She glanced at the chronometer, then at the crew, then back at the captain. Something in her expression shifted, just slightly, just enough that Heridan caught it. "Problem, Commander?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. That alone was unusual. Senyev didn't hesitate. "No, sir," she said after a moment. "Just, does the bridge feel cold to you?" Heridan frowned. The environmental systems read normal. He could see the indicator lights from where he stood. Green, all green. Temperature at standard 18 degrees Celsius. Humidity controlled. Air pressure nominal. But now that she'd mentioned it, yes. There was a chill, not in the air, somewhere else. Somewhere he couldn't quite name. "Check the environmental systems," he ordered. "Might be a variance in the heating coils." "Already on it, sir," Senyev said. But her voice carried a note he didn't like. Uncertainty. As if she didn't believe her own suggestion. The rest of the bridge continued its work. But Heridan noticed other things now. Small things. Ensign Kalla rubbing his arms as if cold. Gunnery Officer Prask blinking too often, like he was trying to clear his vision. A servitor's hand twitching. Just once, barely perceptible. But servitors didn't twitch. Their movements were precise, programmed, inhuman in their consistency. "Translation in 2 minutes," Umeth called. Heridan pushed the unease aside. They had a job to do. This was a routine recon sweep of System Designate 88 Taurus, a cluster of dead worlds flagged for Mechanicus survey. No strategic value, no known Xenos presence, just rocks and dust and the cold silence of empty space. They'd drop in, run the augers, file the report, and move on to the next grid coordinate. Standard work for a recon picket, the kind of mission you could run in your sleep. The warp translation began. Every voidfarer knew the sensation, the moment when reality folded, when the skin of the universe peeled back and spat you from the immaterium into the materium. It was violent, disorienting. The Geller field collapsed, and suddenly the laws of physics reasserted themselves with brutal finality. Crew who were sensitive to such things, psychers especially, but even baseline humans sometimes, would feel it like a punch to the gut, a moment of vertigo, of nausea, of wrongness before the world stabilized. But this time, the wrongness didn't stop. Herodin gripped the command throne's armrest as the ship shuddered. The lights flickered. Normal. The deck vibrated. Normal. The viewport blazed with the familiar flash of translation. Normal. And then they were through. Real space embraced them. The Adamant Resolve drifted into System 88 Taurus at sub-light velocity. Plasma drives, flaring to arrest their momentum. Translation complete, Umeth reported. His voice was steady, professional. Navigator Yevrin confirmed stable exit. No complications. Augers active, called the sensor officer. Scanning now. Herodin exhaled. Good, clean translation, everything by the book. But that chill was still there, stronger now. And something else, something he couldn't quite. Lieutenant Commander Senyev put a hand to her temple. Sir, She stopped, swallowed. Sorry, I felt dizzy for a moment. Medici, Herodin ordered immediately. I'm fine, sir, just the translation was rougher than I expected. It was smooth as silk, Umeth interjected, confused. Navigator confirms. I said I'm fine, Lieutenant. Senyev's voice was sharper than usual. She steadied herself against the command console. Her face was pale. Proceeding with system analysis. Herodin watched her for a moment longer, then turned to the viewport. System 88 Taurus spread before them. A yellow dwarf star, 6 planetary bodies, 2 asteroid belts. The auger display painted it all in clean geometric lines. Distances, orbital mechanics, mass readings. Dead worlds, as expected. No life signs, no energy signatures. No. Sir, the sensor officer's voice was tight. We're not reading any warp signatures. Herodin's eyes narrowed. Clarify. The warp, sir. The immaterium. The officer's hands moved across his console. Standard procedure is to read the warp's background radiation in a system. Helps us orient, confirms translation accuracy. But I'm reading nothing. It's like the warp isn't here. That didn't make sense. The warp was everywhere. It was the undercurrent of reality, the sea of souls, the roiling madness that existed in every corner of the galaxy. You couldn't escape it. Even in real space, it bled through. Psychers sensed it. Navigators swam in it. Astropaths used it to scream across the void. It was always there, always present, always. Run diagnostics on the warp sensors, Herodin ordered. Could be an equipment malfunction. Already did, sir. Twice. Equipment's functioning normally, it's just there's nothing to read. The bridge fell quiet. Not the comfortable silence of efficient work, but something heavier. Something that pressed against the ears like deep water. Herodin glanced around. His crew looked wrong, uncomfortable. Ensign Kalla was gripping his stylus so hard his knuckles were white. Gunnery Officer Prask kept glancing toward the viewport as if expecting something to emerge from the darkness. Even the servitors seemed off. Their movements a fraction slower, their dead eyes somehow more hollow than usual. Vox, Herodin said. Contact the astropathic choir. Ask them to confirm system readings. Master Vox Trell nodded and moved to the internal communications panel. He keyed the channel. Choir Sanctum, this is Bridge Vox. Respond, please. Silence. Choir Sanctum, respond. Nothing. Trell frowned and adjusted the frequency. Astropathic Choir, this is Master Vox Trell, requesting immediate confirmation of your status. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Sir, Trell said slowly. They're not responding. Herodin felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, not yet, but I'm concerned, deep and instinctive. Send a runner. I want eyes on that sanctum now. Aye, sir. A junior rating was dispatched. The bridge resumed its work, but the rhythm was broken now. Conversations were quieter, movements are more hesitant. Herodon watched the main auger display as it was populated with data. 6 dead worlds, 2 asteroid belts, no structures, no energy, no life, just rocks circling a dying star, and no warp. Minutes passed. The runner returned. He was a young man, barely 20, with the wide-eyed look of someone who'd just seen something they couldn't explain. "Captain," he said, breathless. "The astropaths, sir, they're all in the sanctum. Together. In the center of the room." Herodon stood. "Their condition?" "They're not hurt, sir. They're just sitting there, huddled together. All of them. They won't respond to questions. One of them," he swallowed. "One of them kept whispering the same thing over and over." "What thing?" The runner looked at Herodon with an expression that would haunt the captain for the rest of his life. Fear, not of an enemy, not of death. Fear of absence. She said, "It's gone. All of it. We're alone." The bridge went silent. Navigator Yevron reported stable warp currents. Standard approach vectors confirmed. But the astropathic choir, 15 trained psychers, the ship's link to the wider Imperium, the voices that could scream across the galaxy, had fallen silent at 0400 hours. When Master Vox went to check on them, he found them huddled together in the center of their sanctum, clutching each other like children, afraid of the dark. None of them were breathing hard. None were crying. They simply stared at the walls, unblinking, unseeing. One of them whispered it again, soft as a prayer, hollow as a tomb. "It's gone. All of it. We're alone." And in that moment, Captain Herodon understood that something was terribly, impossibly wrong. Not with the ship, not with the mission, with reality itself. But he didn't understand what. Not yet. Chapter 2. The first symptom. Medica Savant. Dren had seen men die in every way the galaxy could devise. Las burns that cooked flesh from the inside. Void exposure that froze blood in the veins. Infections that turned organs to soup. Shrapnel wounds that painted bulkheads red. He'd served in the Medici Corps for 22 years, stitched together bodies that should have been corpses, and pronounced death on men who'd fought to their last breath. But he'd never seen anything like crewman Davros. The man sat on the examination slab at 0430 hours, 6 hours after the Adamant Resolve had translated into System 88 Taurus. His vitals displayed on the medical cogitator in clean, steady lines. Heart rate, 72 beats per minute. Blood pressure, 118/76. Respiratory function, normal. Core temperature, 36.8 degrees Celsius. Organ function, optimal. Neurological scan, no abnormalities detected. By every measure the Imperium possessed, Davros was healthy. But the man was dying. Dren could see it in his eyes. Not physical deterioration, but something worse. A hollowness, like looking into the windows of an abandoned hab block. Davros stared at the bulkhead, unblinking, his hands resting limply in his lap. He'd stopped vomiting an hour ago. Now he just sat, breathing, existing, but barely. "Davros," Dren said, not unkindly. "Can you hear me?" A long pause. Then slowly, Davros's eyes shifted to meet the Medicae savant's gaze. "Yes." "Can you describe what you're feeling?" Another pause. Longer this time. Davros's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Empty," he finally said. The word came out flat, effectless. Like Like someone reached inside me and scooped everything out, and now there's just nothing. Dren made a notation on his data slate. Psychological distress, possible dissociative episode. Are you in pain? No. Nausea? No, not anymore. Dizziness? Disorientation? No. Davros looked down at his hands. I don't feel anything. It's not numbness. It's not sadness. It's like the part of me that feels things aren't there anymore. Like it was cut out. Dren frowned. He'd seen shell shock. He'd seen combat fatigue, warp sickness, even early-stage possession. This was different. The man's effect was completely flat, but not in the way of sedation or trauma. It was as if Davros had been diminished somehow, reduced, made less than he was. I'm going to run another scan, Dren said. Full neurological deep sweep. Might take a few minutes. Davros nodded, but there was no emotion in the gesture, just mechanical compliance. Dren activated the examination arch, and the machine hummed to life, bathing Davros in pale green light as it mapped every synapse, every neural pathway, every electron firing in his brain. The results came back normal. Dren stared at the display. This wasn't possible. If Davros was experiencing psychological collapse, and clearly he was, there had to be a cause. Chemical imbalance, neurological damage, something. But the cogitator insisted the man's brain was functioning perfectly. Medicus savant? A young orderly appeared at the doorway, face pale. Sir, we have more. Dren looked up sharply. More what? More crew reporting the same symptoms. 17 in the last hour, and it's spreading. By 0600 hours, the medical bay was full. Crew members sat on examination slabs, leaned against bulkheads, or simply stood in the corridors outside, waiting their turn. They all wore the same expression Davros had: hollow, empty, absent. Some had been vomiting. Others reported dizziness, coldness, a sensation like falling even when standing still. But most just described the emptiness. It's like a hole, one woman said. Her name was Rating Kellis, a loader on gun deck 4. Right here. She pressed a hand to her chest, where something used to be. Now there's just nothing. Dren moved from patient to patient, running scans, taking readings, documenting symptoms. Every test came back normal. Blood works clean, neural activity standard, organ function optimal. According to the Imperium's medical technology, these people were perfectly healthy, but they were falling apart. A deck officer, Lieutenant Harrow, a man who'd served 12 years without complaint, sat on a bench with his head in his hands. I can't remember why I'm here, he said quietly. Not on the ship, I know that. I mean, why am I here? Why do I exist? There was a reason once. I know there was. But I can't find it anymore. Dren felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with temperature. He made another notation. Existential dissociation. Loss of meaning/purpose. He was compiling a list of symptoms, building a catalogue of wrongness, but none of it added up to a diagnosis. And then the bionics started failing. Gunnery Sergeant Kresk stumbled into the medical bay at 0645 hours, his right leg dragging. The limb was a Mark IV augmetic, standard issue for Navy personnel who'd lost legs in combat. It should have functioned flawlessly. Titanium bones, synthetic muscle fibers, neural interface that responded faster than organic flesh. But Kresk's leg was seizing. The knee joint locked, released, locked again. His foot twisted at an unnatural angle. Dren caught him before he fell and guided him to an examination slab. When did this start? Dren asked. already scanning the augmetics diagnostic port. 10 minutes ago, Kresk said through gritted teeth. I was walking to my station. Then it just stopped responding, like the connection's been severed. Dren pulled up the bionics internal diagnostics. Everything registered green, power supply functional, neural interface intact, servos operational. But the leg refused to obey Kresk's commands. It twitched and spasmed, moving independently of his will. I don't understand, Dren muttered. The systems are working. The connection is solid. There's no reason for... A scream cut him off. 2 beds down, a crewman named Valis was clawing at his augmetic eye. The ocular implant, a simple replacement for an eye lost to void debris years ago, had begun spinning in its socket, whirring like a servitor's optic. Valis grabbed at it, trying to tear it out, blood streaming down his face. Hold him, Dren shouted. Orderlies rushed to restrain Valis. Dren moved quickly, jabbing a sedative into the man's neck. Valis slumped, unconscious, but the augmetic eye continued to spin, its lens rotating through spectrum filters, infrared, ultraviolet, thermal, as if searching for something it couldn't find. Dren felt his hands shake. He'd treated bionic malfunctions before, faulty wiring, corrupted machine spirits. But this was systemic, as if the augmetics themselves were reacting to something in the environment, something that shouldn't affect them at all. Sir, the orderly's voice was tight. The astropaths, one of them is seizing. Captain Heridan received the reports in his ready room, each one worse than the last. 43 crew members showed symptoms, 12 bionics malfunctioning, 3 astropaths catatonic. 1 navigator refused to leave his chamber, claiming the warp was gone and he couldn't feel the Astronomicon anymore. The ship's confessor had reported 7 crew requesting last rites, not because they were dying, but because they couldn't find a reason to keep living. Heridan read each report twice, then set them aside. His hands were steady. His expression is calm. But inside, he felt something he hadn't experienced since his first void deployment 40 years ago. Helplessness. Options, he said to Lieutenant Commander Senyev, who stood at attention across his desk. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, a slight tremor in her hands she was trying to hide. We could attempt immediate translation back to the fleet, she said. Get out of this system. Whatever's happening might be localized. The navigator won't enter the warp. Says he can't feel it anymore. Can't navigate what he can't sense. Then we run sublight. Head for the system's edge. Request emergency extraction. At sublight, we're looking at weeks, maybe months. Can the crew hold that long? Senyev didn't answer. They both knew the answer was no. Heridan stood and moved to the viewport. System 88 Taurus spread before him. Dead worlds, cold stars, empty space. Nothing out there but rocks and silence. No enemy to fight, no heretics to purge. Just absence. Increase rationing on stims and morale enhancers, he finally said. Have the confessor conduct mass prayers every 4 hours. Work rotations at half standard to minimize contact. And get Medici Savant Dren to find me answers. I don't care if he has to tear apart every medical text in the archives. I want to know what's killing my crew. Yes, sir. Senyev saluted and turned to leave. Commander. She stopped. How are you feeling? For a moment, Senyev didn't respond. Then, empty, sir. Like there's a hole where something used to be. But I'm managing. Heridan nodded. Dismissed. When she was gone, he sank into his chair and closed his eyes. He'd commanded men in battle. He'd faced Xenos and traitors and the horrors of the warp itself. But this was different. You couldn't shoot emptiness. You couldn't burn a hole with a Lascannon. You couldn't order absence to retreat. All he could do was watch his crew fall apart and hope someone, somewhere, had an answer. Crewman Valens died at 07:53 hours. He'd been sitting in his bunk when his squad mates found him. Not slumped, not collapsed, just sitting, upright, eyes open, staring at nothing. At first they thought he was in shock, another victim of the spreading malaise. But when they tried to rouse him, he didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't breathe. They brought him to the medical bay at 08:10 hours. Dren performed an immediate examination. Heart stopped. Brain activity ceased. No trauma, no wounds, no toxins, no disease. The body simply turned off. As if Valens had decided on some level deeper than conscious thought that continuing to exist required more effort than he could muster. Dren ran every test he had. He checked for neural inhibitors, exotic poisons, and warp corruption. Nothing. The autopsy revealed a perfectly healthy 31-year-old male who had simply stopped living. At 08:20 hours, Dren filed his report. Cause of death: catastrophic psychological collapse leading to autonomic shutdown. The patient exhibited no will to continue living. He marked the file with the black seal, the Medici cause designation for fatality without enemy action. Death by accident, death by illness, death by nothing. By midday, 17 more crew were dead. None showed wounds, none showed disease. They simply stopped, as if living required a reason they could no longer remember. Some died sitting, others are standing. One woman died mid-sentence, her words trailing off into silence as her body forgot how to breathe. Dren stood in the medical bay, surrounded by corpses wrapped in Navy-issue shrouds, and realized with cold, creeping horror that he had no idea how to stop this. The Imperium's medical science, millennia of accumulated knowledge, technology, and doctrine, was useless. Worse than useless. It couldn't even identify the problem. Whatever was killing the crew of the Adamant Resolve wasn't a disease.
It was an absence.
And you couldn't cure what wasn't there. Chapter 3. What the Servitors Saw. Servitor Unit 447. Gamma didn't feel the emptiness. It moved through the lower engineering decks at 0900 hours, carrying a plasma conduit regulator that weighed 43 kilograms. Its augmetic legs, pistons and hydraulics where human limbs once were, moved with metronomic precision. Step, clank, step, clank. The rhythm never varied, never hesitated. Behind it, Enginseer third-class Vaughn stumbled, catching himself against a bulkhead. His face was grey, sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold. He'd been fine yesterday. Well, not fine. Nobody was fine anymore, but functional. Now he looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Servitor," Vaughn said, his voice hoarse. "Slow down." Unit 447. Gamma did not slow down. It had received no command to alter pace. Its cortex, what remained of a human brain, stripped of emotion and personality and everything that made it a person, processed the order and discarded it. Vaughn lacked the authority codes. Only Tech Priest Hadrax could override its programming. Vaughn swore and tried to keep up. He made it another 20 meters before his legs gave out. He collapsed against a support strut, breathing hard, one hand pressed to his chest like he was trying to hold something inside that was leaking out. Unit 447-Gamma reached the conduit junction, set down the regulator, and began the installation process. Remove panel. Disconnect the old unit. Attach a new unit. Seal panel. The work took 6 minutes and 42 seconds. Perfect efficiency. No wasted motion. No hesitation. No fear. When it turned around, Vaughn was still on the ground, staring at nothing. Unit 447-Gamma registered this as irrelevant data and moved to its next task. It had 17 more work orders logged in its cortex. The ship required maintenance. The ship would receive maintenance. Whether the humans could keep up didn't matter. It was a servitor. It didn't need reasons to exist. And in System 88 Taurus, that made it better off than every human aboard. Tech Priest Enginseer Klost noticed the pattern by mid-morning. He stood in Engineering Bay 7, watching 3 servitors perform synchronized repairs on a damaged power relay. Their movements were fluid, almost graceful, if you could call the jerky precision of augmetic limbs graceful. Weld, adjust, test. Weld, adjust, test. The work that should have taken a human crew 4 hours was completed in 90 minutes. But it wasn't just the speed, it was the smoothness. Servitors were normally functional but crude. They followed orders to the letter, but lacked intuition, adaptability. You had to tell them exactly what to do, step by step, or they'd stand there waiting for input like broken cogitators. These servitors weren't waiting for anything. They anticipated problems, adjusted their approach without being told, worked together with an efficiency that shouldn't have been possible for mindless drones. Enginseer? Joss appeared at his elbow. The woman looked terrible. Sunken eyes, trembling hands, that hollow expression everyone had now. Servitor 332-Delta finished the coolant flush 30 minutes ahead of schedule. Perfect work. No errors. Kloss nodded slowly. How many servitors are operating above expected performance levels? Joss consulted her data slate. All of them, sir. Every single one. Efficiency up across the board. Some units are performing 15-20% better than baseline, and they're not degrading. No maintenance issues, no malfunctions. It's like they're... She trailed off. Thriving. Klost finished quietly. Joss looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Confusion, fear, envy. How is that possible? They're machines, lobotomized criminals and corpses. They shouldn't be getting better at their jobs. Kloss didn't have an answer, but he was starting to suspect one, and the thought made something cold and terrible settle in his gut. Astropath Secundus Yafara was the first to put it into words. She'd been catatonic for 18 hours, huddled in the astropathic sanctum with the rest of the choir, staring at walls and whispering about emptiness. But at 1100 hours, she emerged, pale, shaking, looking like she'd aged decades, and demanded to speak with the captain. Herodon received her in his ready room. She refused to sit, just stood there, thin as a rail, her blind eyes seared shut during her soul binding on terror, somehow still conveying the weight of what she'd experienced. "It's called the Stillness," she said without preamble. Her voice was raw, like she'd been screaming. Maybe she had. The absence, the silence. I've felt it before, in records, in warnings passed down through the choirs, but I never thought I'd experience it myself. Herodon leaned forward. Explain. Yafara's hands twisted together. The warp is everywhere, Captain. Even in real space, it bleeds through. We swim in it, breathe it, live in it. It's the background radiation of existence, the screaming chaos that underlies all reality. Psychers like me, we feel it constantly. It's like standing in an ocean. The waves crash, the currents pull, but there's always water. Always. And now there's nothing. Her voice cracked. It's not that the warp is quiet. It's that it's gone, severed, cut off, like someone built a wall between reality and the immaterium and left us on the wrong side. We're in dead space, Captain. A null zone. A place where souls can't touch the warp. where psychers are blind and mute and deaf all at once. Herodon felt his jaw tighten. How is that possible? The Necrons, Yafara whispered. The Xenos who ruled the galaxy before mankind, before the Old Ones, before gods. They hated the warp, hated it because they had no souls. Their species traded them away in their war against the Citan. So they built weapons, pylons, structures made of Blackstone that push back the immaterium, create zones where the warp cannot exist. She took a shuddering breath. We're in one of those zones now. A Pariah Nexus, a place designed to kill anything with a soul. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Pariah. Herodon knew the term. Blanks, untouchables, soulless humans, who caused revulsion and dread in everyone around them. The Imperium used them sometimes. The Sisters of Silence, Colexis assassins, rare, terrifying, necessary. But a Pariah Nexus, an entire region of space transformed into a null zone. How big? Herodon asked. Yafara's blind eyes turned toward him. The Necrons are awakening, Captain. Tomb worlds stirring across the galaxy. And where they wake, they build. The Pariah Nexus is expanding, sector by sector, system by system. Eventually, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Tech Priest Hadrax delivered the technical confirmation 2 hours later, standing in the medical bay with Medici Savant Dren and a half-dozen senior officers. He'd run full spectral analyses on the system, mapped energy signatures, compared readings against Mechanicus archives. Blackstone, Hadrax said, his voice a mechanical rasp through his vox grill. Pylons detected on 4 planetary bodies. Necron construction, confirmed by geometric patterns and material composition. They form a network, a web of null field generators that suppress warp phenomena across the entire system. He projected a hololith. 6 planets appeared, with glowing lines connecting 4 of them in a perfect tetrahedron. At the center, a sphere of influence, the null zone. The Adamant Resolve sat dead center in the sphere. The pylons create an anti-warp field, Hadrax continued. Localized severance of real space from the immaterium. Within this field, psychic phenomena cease. Demonic incursions are impossible. Warp travel is inhibited, and human souls. He paused. Human souls remain anchored to their bodies, but lose connection to the greater warp. The result is profound psychological distress, disassociation, loss of purpose, eventually death. But servitors are unaffected, Dren said. It wasn't a question. Correct. Hadrax turned his augmetic eyes, glowing red optics, toward the Medici Savant. Servitors possess only vestigial soul remnants, insufficient to experience warp connection. They are, for all practical purposes, pariahs themselves, soulless, and therefore immune to the stillness. Lieutenant Commander Senyev, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. Her voice was tight. So the lobotomized slaves are fine, but the rest of us are dying because we have souls. In crude terms, yes. That's not crude, that's just true. The room fell quiet. Herodon watched his officers process the information, watched the realization dawn on their faces. I watched hope, what little remained, drain away like water through a sieve. Can we shield against it? He asked. Geller fields. Hexagrammic words. Hadrax shook his head. Geller fields protect against warp intrusion. This is the opposite, warp exclusion. There is no known Imperial technology that can counteract Blackstone suppression at this scale. Then how do we survive? No one answered. Because the answer, the only answer, was staring them in the face every time they passed a servitor in the corridors. The mindless, soulless cyborgs who worked with perfect efficiency while humans collapsed around them. You survived by not being human anymore. Engineer Klost stood in Cargo Bay 3 at 1600 hours, watching Servitor Unit 889 Kappa weld a breach seal with perfect precision. The servitor had been a murderer once. He'd accessed its cortex stamp out of morbid curiosity. The Mechanicus kept records, filing numbers where names used to be. The man had killed 17 people on a hive world, violated the Emperor's law, received the merciful sentence of servitorization rather than execution. Now it was useful. Now it serves the Omnissiah. Now it was happy, in whatever dim, flickering way a meat machine could experience contentment. Its work was flawless. Its movements are smooth. No hesitation, no fear, no crushing, suffocating emptiness eating it alive from the inside. Klost caught himself thinking, what would it take? A quick surgery. The Mechanicus had the tools. A few precise cuts to the frontal lobe. Remove emotion. Remove self. Remove the parts of his brain that screamed in silent agony every waking moment since they'd entered this system. Then the stillness wouldn't matter anymore. Then he'd be free. The thought was so seductive it made him sick. He backed away from the servitor, heart hammering, horrified at his own mind. But even as he retreated, even as he pressed his back against the cold bulkhead and tried to breathe, he couldn't stop thinking it. He looked at the servitor. Perfect, content, useful, whole in its incompleteness. And for the first time in his life, Engineer Third-Class Klost envied the lobotomized, envied their emptiness, envied the absence where their souls used to be. Because emptiness couldn't hurt you. And in the stillness, nothing hurt more than being whole. Chapter 4. The Hollow Ones. Vignette 1. Jens. Crewman Jens found the scalpel in the Medici supply locker at 0230 hours. He'd been thinking about it for 6 hours. Ever since he'd watched Servitor Unit 332 Delta walk past him in the corridor, moving with that perfect, mindless efficiency. The servitor didn't feel the emptiness. Didn't wake up screaming from nightmares about nothing. Didn't spend every waking moment trying to remember why getting out of bed mattered. The servitor just was. And that seemed like paradise. Jens locked himself in a maintenance closet. The scalpel gleamed under the flickering lumen strip. He'd done his research in the Mechanicus medical texts, knew roughly where to cut. The prefrontal cortex, the limbic system. Just a few precise incisions, and he could sever the parts of his brain that felt emotion, that experienced the crushing, suffocating absence of the stillness. He pressed the blade to his temple. His hand shook. Not from fear, he was long past fear, from anticipation, from the terrible seductive hope that this would work, that he could escape himself. The blade bit skin. Blood ran hot down his cheek. He pressed harder. The door burst open. 2 ratings tackled him, wrestled the scalpel away. He fought them, screaming, not words, just raw sound, the howl of something that desperately wanted to stop being human. They dragged him to the Medici bay, strapped him down, sedated him. When Medici Savant Dren examined the wound, he found Jens had managed to cut 3 centimeters into his skull before being stopped. Another few minutes, and he would have succeeded, would have carved out the parts of himself that hurt. Dren sutured the wound with shaking hands, and wondered how many others were thinking the same thing. Vignette 2. The Commissar's Mercy. Commissar Halen had executed men before. Cowards, deserters, traitors. It was his duty, maintaining discipline, ensuring the Emperor's will was upheld even in the face of horror. He'd never hesitated, never flinched. The Imperium required hard men for hard work. But when he raised his bolt pistol at 0900 hours in the crew habitation deck, his hand trembled. 3 crew members knelt before him. Ratings Voss, Keller and Tetch. They'd been found in an airlock. Override codes entered, 30 seconds from spacing themselves into the void. The Master-at-Arms had stopped them just in time. Cowardice in the face of the enemy, Halen said, his voice mechanical. The words tasted like ash. Attempted desertion. The penalty is death. There is no enemy, Voss said. His voice was flat, empty. There's nothing. That's the problem. Don't you understand? There's nothing. Halen understood. He felt it too. The hole where something vital used to be. The suffocating silence that pressed down like deep water. Every breath required conscious effort. Every heartbeat felt like a choice he had to keep making over and over, and he was tired. I'm so tired. But he was a commissar. His duty was clear. He shot Voss first. The bolt round took him in the forehead, exploded his skull in a spray of red mist and bone. Keller next. She didn't even close her eyes, just stared at him with something like gratitude. Tetch actually smiled before the round hit. When it was done, Halen stood in the corridor, surrounded by corpses and watching the crew. His bolt pistol hung at his side, smoke curling from the barrel. And then, for the first time in 30 years of service, Commissar Halen wept. Not for the dead. They were the lucky ones. He wept for the living, for everyone still breathing, still fighting the stillness, still pretending there was a reason to continue. He wept because killing them had been mercy, and mercy wasn't supposed to come from a bolt pistol. Vignette 3. The Navigator's Failure. Navigator Yevrin had been bred for this. Generations of genetic manipulation, psychic enhancement, the opening of his third eye. Also he could see the warp, navigate its currents, guide ships through the Immaterium's chaos. But at 1400 hours, staring into the warp from his sealed navigation chamber, he saw nothing. I can try, he told Captain Herodin over the Vox. His voice was hoarse. He hadn't slept in 3 days, hadn't eaten in 2. His body was consuming itself, burning through reserves trying to find something, anything to grasp in the void. I can attempt translation. Emergency jump. Get us out of the null zone. Do it, Herodin said. There was no hope in his voice, just the mechanical execution of duty. Yevrin opened his third eye, the warp-sensitive organ in the center of his forehead, hidden beneath psychically reactive flesh. Normally, when he looked into the Immaterium, he saw infinity, saw colors that didn't exist, patterns that defied physics, the screaming chorus of a billion souls echoing across space and time. Now he saw nothing, just the inside of his own skull, just darkness. He pushed anyway, reached out with his mind, trying to touch the warp, to find even a thread of psychic energy he could use to tear a hole in reality. His nose started bleeding, then his ears. His third eye burned like someone had pressed a hot iron to his forehead. I can't, he gasped. I can't find it. It's not there. The Astronomican's gone. The warp's gone. Everything's gone. He collapsed against the navigation throne, chest heaving, blood running down his face. The ship remained in real space, trapped, caught in the stillness like an insect in amber. In his sealed chamber, surrounded by hexagrammic wards and purity seals, Navigator Yevrin, whose bloodline stretched back to the earliest days of the Imperium, whose third eye had guided ships through the warp for 20 years, curled into a ball and screamed into his hands. Because he was useless. Because his gift meant nothing here. Because he was just another human, trapped and dying, in a place that had no use for souls. Vignette 4. The Captain's Log. Captain's Log, Endeavour Class Light. Cruiser Adamant Resolve. Date: 15 hours since translation into System 88 Taurus. Captain Herodon recording. I'm losing them. 17 dead as of this morning. 43 incapacitated. 8 confined to quarters for their own safety. 2 executions carried out by Commissar Halen. Emperor, forgive us. They were necessary. The medici bay is full of crew who aren't sick, aren't injured, but can't function. Can't remember why they should. The astropaths are catatonic. The navigator can't find the warp. The servitors work with perfect efficiency, while human beings collapse around them. The ship runs because machines and lobotomized meat puppets don't need souls to turn wrenches and weld bulkheads. I've commanded this vessel for 9 years. I've faced orc raiders and traitor ambushes. I've watched good men die in the Emperor's service, and I've carried that weight because it meant something, because their death served a purpose. But this is different. There's no enemy to fight, no battle to win. We're just fading, like we're being erased one piece at a time. Lieutenant Commander Senyev suggested scuttling the ship. Better to die quickly than let the Stillness take us. I told her no. We have a duty. We must survive. We must report. But I'm not sure I believe that anymore. I think the truth is simpler. I don't know how to give the order. I don't know how to tell my crew that dying is our only option. Because once I do that, once I admit there's no way out, what's stopping me from walking to the nearest airlock and joining Voss and the others? Duty, the Emperor. I can't feel either anymore. I don't know what I'm feeling. Just absence. Like someone carved out everything that made me human and left a hollow shell walking around, going through the motions, because stopping would require making a choice, and I don't remember how to do that. We detected something on long-range augers. A planet, 4th orbital position. The sensors are running analysis now. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's something. Maybe it doesn't matter. I'll keep recording. Keep documenting. Because that's what captains do. But I don't know who I'm recording for anymore. Vignette 5. The Hollow World. The auger results came through at 1830 hours. Lieutenant Commander Senyev delivered them personally, her hands shaking as she held the data slate. Herodon took it without comment and read the findings. Planetary body, System 88 Taurus 4. Classification, barren terrestrial, no atmosphere. Surface composition, iron, silicate, trace necrodermis compounds. Notable features, extensive artificial structures detected. Geometric arrays, material consistent with Blackstone. Energy signature, null field generation at catastrophic levels. Warp signature, none detected. Biological activity, none detected. Conclusion, Necron construction. Classification, hollow world. Herodon stared at the screen. The image showed a world of iron and stone, its surface covered in towering obelisks, arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Hexagrams, pentagrams, configurations that hurt to look at because they were too precise, too perfect, too wrong for organic minds to process comfortably. Blackstone pylons, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all generating null fields that wove together into a suffocating web of anti-warp energy. This was the source, the heart of the Stillness, a planet transformed into a weapon against reality itself. Captain, Senyev said quietly, we should turn around, run, get as far from that thing as we can manage on the sublight. Herodon looked at her, saw the fear in her eyes. The desperate animals need to flee. We need to get closer, he heard himself say. The words surprised him. He hadn't planned to say them. I hadn't thought about them. They just emerged, like they'd been placed in his mouth by something else. Senyev stared at him. "Sir? We need to get closer," he repeated. "Full scan, document everything. That's our mission. Captain, that thing is killing us. The closer we get, the worse it will be. The crew can't." "I gave you an order, Commander." Senyev's jaw tightened. For a moment, Heridan thought she might refuse, might pull her sidearm and shoot him. It would have been justified. He was ordering his crew closer to their deaths for no tactical reason, no strategic benefit, just because. But she didn't refuse. She saluted, mechanically, joylessly, and turned to relay the order. The Adamant Resolve's engines flared. The ship turned toward the hollow world, plasma drives pushing them deeper into the null zone, closer to the source of the stillness. Heridan stood at the viewport and watched the planet grow larger. He tried to understand why he'd given the order, tried to find the reasoning, the tactical justification, the logic, but there was nothing. Just a pull, not physical, not psychic, something deeper, something that bypassed thought entirely and went straight to action. The stillness wasn't just killing them, it was controlling them. And as the hollow world filled the viewport, black obelisks reaching toward dead stars, geometric patterns that whispered of a universe without gods or souls or meaning, Heridan realized they'd never had a choice. They'd been caught the moment they translated into this system, and now they were being reeled in like fish on a line, pulled towards something worse than death, worse than the warp, worse than anything humanity had a name for. The servitors continued their work, efficient, content, whole in their incompleteness, and the humans kept dying, one by one, pulled toward a planet that had no use for souls. Chapter 5. What Remains. They came without warning, at 03:47 hours, 3 days after the Adamant Resolve had drifted within weapons range of the hollow world. The augurs detected them first. 3 sleek black ships cutting through the void like knives. Cobra-class destroyers, Imperial Navy, but their transponder codes were wrong, encrypted beyond standard military protocols. When they hailed, the Vox crackled with a woman's voice, cold and flat as stone. "This is Sister Commander Thessaly of the Anathema Psychona. You have entered a restricted zone. Cut your engines and prepare to be escorted out." Captain Heridan, what remained of him, could barely process the words. He'd been standing at the viewport for 18 hours, staring at the hollow world, unable to look away. His crew had dwindled to 41 functional personnel. The rest were dead, catatonic, or confined to quarters after attempting self-harm. "Comply immediately," the voice repeated. "We are coming aboard." The Sisters of Silence arrived 30 minutes later. Heridan watched through the security feeds as their boarding craft clamped onto the Adamant Resolve's dorsal airlock. Watched as the hatches cycled open and figures in midnight black armor stepped through. Tall women, their faces hidden behind featureless helms, moving with predatory grace. And the moment they boarded, everything got worse. Crewman Davros, who'd been the first to feel the emptiness days ago, who'd somehow adapted, found a way to function in the hollow numbness, collapsed in the corridor, just fell to his knees, vomiting, hands pressed to his head, like something was trying to split his skull open from the inside. Rating Kellis started screaming, high, wordless shrieks that echoed through the ship's Vox system before someone cut her feed. In the medici bay, 3 crew who'd been stable, or as stable as anyone could be, went rigid, eyes rolling back, mouths open in silent howls. The Sisters of Silence were pariahs, blanks, soulless, and their presence didn't cancel out the stillness, it magnified it, like pressing on a bruise, like drowning in deeper water. Lieutenant Commander Senyev appeared at Heridan's side. Blood ran from her nose. Her hands clutched the edge of the command throne so hard her knuckles went white. "Sir," she gasped, they're worse than the planet. How is that possible?" Heridan didn't answer. Couldn't. Because he felt it too. The Sisters of Silence weren't just empty. They were absent-made flesh. Walking voids. Black holes where human beings should be. And being near them, after days of the stillness, was like being skinned alive. But they were salvation. They had to be. Because the alternative was dying here, trapped in orbit around a Necron weapon, pulled inexorably towards something worse than death. "Helm," Heridan rasped. "Follow their lead. Get us out." The 3 Cobra-class destroyers took formation around the Adamant Resolve. Their engines flared, and slowly, agonizingly, they began to pull the cruiser away from the hollow world, away from the heart of the null zone, away from the stillness. It took 6 hours. 6 hours of the crew collapsing, screaming, clawing at their own skin. 6 hours of the Sisters of Silence moving through the ship like ghosts, their very presence a reminder that salvation came with a price. But finally, the augurs registered a change. Warp signatures, faint, distant, but there. The immaterium bleeding back into real space like blood returning to a numb limb. They'd escaped. The symptoms didn't end. Even 3 days out from the Pariah Nexus, even with warp signatures strong and stable, the crew remained broken. Heridan stood in the Medici bay and watched Medici Savant Dren examine patient after patient, running scans that showed nothing wrong, documenting symptoms that shouldn't exist. "Phantom pain," Dren said quietly. His eyes were hollow. He'd lost weight, aged years in days. That's what they're calling it in the medical texts. When a limb is amputated, the nerves still fire, still send signals to a brain that insists the limb is there. The patient feels pain in something that doesn't exist anymore. He gestured to the occupied beds. They're experiencing the same thing, except it's not a limb. It's everything. Their connection to the warp, their soul's integration with the immaterium. It was severed in the Nexus, and even though we're out, even though the connection should be restored, they still feel the absence, still experience the stillness. "Will it fade?" Heridan asked. Dren didn't answer for a long time. Then, "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe we're all permanently damaged now. Maybe you can't spend 3 days in a place like that and come back whole." Heridan looked at his reflection on a medical monitor, saw a stranger staring back. Hollow eyes, grey skin, a face that looked like it had forgotten how to be human. "How many did we lose?" he asked quietly. 55 dead, 18 incapacitated, 9 catatonic. Dren's voice was mechanical. "Out of a crew of 73, we have 18 functional personnel, and functional is a generous assessment. 18 out of 73. Heridan closed his eyes and tried to feel something. Grief, anger, guilt. But there was nothing. Just the same hollow numbness that had followed him out of the Nexus like a shadow he couldn't shake. The inquisitorial summons came 1 week later, after they'd limped to the nearest Imperial outpost and filed their preliminary reports. Inquisitor Voke of the Ordo Xenos wanted testimony, wanted details, wanted to understand exactly what had happened to the crew of the Adamant Resolve in System 88 Taurus. They brought Heridan to a sealed chamber deep in the outpost's security levels. Grey walls, single lumen strip, a table with 2 chairs and a recording servitor in the corner, its augmetic fingers poised over a data slate. Inquisitor Voke was a thin man with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. He sat across from Herodin and activated the recording device without preamble. State your name and rank for the record. Captain Eridan Herodin, Endeavour-class light cruiser Adamant Resolve, serial number. That's sufficient. Voke leaned back. Tell me about the Pariah Nexus. Herodin told him everything. The translation, the symptoms, the deaths, the servitors thriving while humans died, the hollow world and its Blackstone pylons, the Sisters of Silence and their terrible rescue. Voke listened without interruption. His expression never changed. When Herodin finished, the Inquisitor made a single notation on his data slate. You're the 4th crew we've extracted from that region, Voke said. 4th in 18 months. Herodin stared at him. You knew? We suspected. The Necrons are awakening across the galaxy. Where they wake, they build. Pariah Nexuses, hollow worlds, networks of Blackstone pylons designed to sever real space from the warp. The Silent King, Zarek, the Necron ruler, intends to weaponize the technology on a galactic scale. Then why are you sending ships in? Herodin's voice rose despite himself. Why are you throwing crews into null zones if you know what happens? Voke met his eyes. Because we need data. We need to understand the effects, document the symptoms, measure the psychological deterioration. Your crew, Captain, was never expected to return intact. You were a test case, an experiment. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Herodin felt something crack inside him. Not anger, not horror, just breaking. Like the last fragile piece of him that had been holding on finally gave way. We were bait, he said quietly. You were necessary, Voke corrected. The Imperium requires information to combat this threat. Your sacrifice, and the sacrifice of your crew, provided that information. 55 dead. Acceptable losses. Herodin laughed. It came out strangled, almost a sob. Acceptable, right. Because we're expendable. Because human lives are just data points. Yes. Voke's voice was flat. Honest. In the face of extinction, Captain, every life is a data point. Every death is a lesson. The Necrons are building more hollow worlds. The Pariah Nexus expands by the year. Within a century, whole sectors will fall silent. Within 5 centuries, perhaps half the galaxy. We need to understand how to fight them, how to survive in null zones, how to shield against the stillness. He closed his data slate. Your crew's suffering taught us that shielding is impossible with current technology, that servitors and null maidens are the only reliable assets in pariah space, that human personnel experience catastrophic psychological collapse within 72 hours of exposure. That is valuable intelligence, Captain, and it cost 55 lives to acquire. Voke stood. You'll be debriefed further over the next week, then reassigned. Your remaining crew will be evaluated and dispersed. Some will return to duty. Some will be retired. Some... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. They gave Herodin a small room in the outpost's transient quarters. Grey walls. A cot. A single viewport looking out at the void. He sat there for 3 days, staring at nothing, and learned the names of his dead. 55 names, 55 faces, men and women who'd trusted him, followed him, died because the Imperium needed data and their lives were cheaper than servitors. On the 4th day, Lieutenant Commander Senyev visited. She looked worse than he did, gaunt, hollow-eyed, moving like every step hurt. They're splitting us up, she said quietly. Reassignments came through. Different ships, different sectors. They don't want us talking to each other. Don't want the story to spread. Of course not. Herodin said. His voice was dull. Bad for morale. Senyev sat beside him. For a long time, neither spoke. Do you still feel it? She finally asked. The stillness? Herodin nodded. Every waking moment. Like there's a hole where something used to be. Like I'm missing a piece of myself I'll never get back. Me too, she laughed. Bitter, broken. I keep thinking, maybe the ones who died were the lucky ones. At least it's over for them. Don't, Herodin said. Not a command, a plea. Don't talk like that. Why not? It's true. Crewman Voss, Keller, Tech, they knew. They understood before the rest of us. Death was mercy compared to this. She stood, straightened her uniform. I requested termination of service, medical discharge. They denied it, said I'm functional enough for reassignment. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. Functional, like a servitor, like a machine. She left without saluting, without saying goodbye. Herodin never saw her again. The Inquisitor closed the file 3 weeks later, sitting in his private office aboard the outpost. He reviewed the final statistics one last time. Crew complement entering Pariah Nexus, 73. Crew surviving extraction, 18. Crew returned to active duty, 2. Crew medically retired, 4. Crew catatonic/hospitalized, 9. Crew deceased, post-extraction, 0. Crew missing, presumed desertion, 3. He made a final notation. Recommend increasing servitor complement for future null zone operations. Human personnel demonstrably unsuitable for extended pariah exposure. Then he looked up at the chronicler, a junior inquisitorial scribe tasked with documenting testimonies, and spoke the words that would be recorded for posterity. The Necrons are building more hollow worlds. The Pariah Nexus expands by the year. Soon whole sectors will fall silent. When that happens, he paused. Let the weight of it settle. When that happens, the Imperium will face a threat we cannot shoot, cannot burn, cannot pray away. Because the enemy isn't corruption or heresy or Xenos aggression. It's absence, the removal of the warp itself. He closed the file with finality. In a galaxy without the warp, without souls, without the Emperor's light reaching into the immaterium, humanity isn't just at a disadvantage. Humanity is obsolete. We are creatures of the warp, whether we admit it or not. Our emotions, our psyches, our connection to the divine, all of it requires the immaterium. Remove that, and we're just meat and bone and despair. The chronicler's stylus paused. Is there hope, my lord? Can we adapt? Voke smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. We can become servitors. We can lobotomize ourselves into usefulness. We can trade our souls for survival. He looked out his viewport at the stars. But that's not an adaptation. That's extinction by another name. He stood, straightened his coat. The stillness is patient. It doesn't need to fight us. It just needs to wait. Wait for us to enter its null zones. Wait for our crews to break. Wait for our fleets to fall silent, one ship at a time. And eventually, he said quietly, it will wait for us all. The chronicler recorded the words, filed the testimony, sealed the report with the inquisitorial sigil, and somewhere in the void, in System 88 Taurus, the hollow world continued its work. Blackstone pylons humming, null fields expanding, the stillness spreading like a cancer across the stars. Patient, inexorable, waiting.